The air in the Langston penthouse was sharp, like the edge of a blade you don't see until it's pressed against your throat. I stood at the threshold of their glass-walled dining room, my heels sinking into the plush Persian rug, feeling every pair of eyes slice through me. The Manhattan skyline glittered beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, a dazzling distraction from the cold calculation in the room. My name is Sophia Voss, and tonight I was supposed to be celebrated as Ethan Langston's fiancé. Instead, I was about to be ambushed. The invitation had arrived 3 days ago, a cream envelope embossed with the Langston crest delivered to my modest San Francisco apartment. The gold foil script read like a royal decree. You are cordially invited to a formal dinner to honor the engagement of Ethan Langston and Sophia Voss. It wasn't addressed to our engagement, just Ethan's, as if I were an accessory to his legacy. I should have known then. The Langstons didn't invite, they summoned. I adjusted the strap of my black silk dress, a simple but elegant piece I'd chosen to avoid their scrutiny. My fingers brushed the leather clutch I carried, a gift from my late father, its worn edges a quiet reminder of where I came from. I wasn't born into their world of old money and older grudges. I'd clawed my way up as a lawyer, building a reputation in San Francisco's cutthroat legal scene. But to the Langstons, I was an outsider, a temporary fixture until someone more suitable came along. The dining room was a showroom of wealth, marble floors polished to a mirror sheen, a chandelier dripping crystals that caught the city lights, and a mahogany table set with china that probably cost more than my car. Ethan stood as I entered, his navy blazer tailored to perfection, but his smile was fleeting, like a man unsure of his lines. He didn't cross the room to greet me, just gestured to the chair beside him. I sat, my spine straight, my hands folded, trying to ignore the weight of the room's silence. Margaret Langston, Ethan's mother, presided at the head of the table, her navy silk gown and diamond earrings screaming effortless power. Her husband, Charles, sat opposite, his gray suit as stiff as his nod in my direction. The rest of the table, cousins, aunts, and a few stone-faced family advisors, watched me like I was a specimen under glass. "Sophia," Margaret purred, her voice honeyed but sharp, "we're so delighted you could join us." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe the warmth in her tone, the way she tilted her champagne flute as if toasting my arrival. But her eyes, cold and appraising, told a different story. I'd met her kind before, clients who smiled while signing contracts that crushed their opponents. I forced a smile, murmuring, "Thank you for having me." Dinner unfolded like a performance. The conversation danced around safe topics, Langston investments and tech startups, a new yacht club in the Hamptons, a charity gala they'd underwritten in London. I tried to contribute, mentioning a pro bono case I'd won for a women's shelter in Oakland. Margaret's lips curved into a faint smile. "How noble," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. The table chuckled, a low, practiced sound that made my skin crawl. Ethan's hand stayed on his fork, his eyes fixed on his plate. No glance, no touch, no defense. The meal was exquisite. Roasted quail, truffle risotto, a dessert of lavender macarons that melted like regret. But every bite tasted like ash. Ethan's silence was louder than the clink of crystal glasses. I'd seen him command boardrooms, charm judges, but here, in his family's domain, he was a shadow. I caught his eye once, hoping for the man who'd once slipped a note into my briefcase that read, "You're unstoppable, so." But tonight, his gaze slid away, apologetic but spineless. Then came the moment that changed everything. Margaret stood, her silk rustling, and tapped her glass with a silver spoon. The room hushed, an anticipatory stillness that made my stomach twist. "Before we toast to family," she said, her smile tight, We have a small tradition to uphold." She reached for a black velvet envelope on the sideboard and placed it in front of me, her fingers lingering like a warning. "A formality, dear, for our new family members." My heart thudded, but I kept my face neutral. I opened the envelope slowly, the paper heavy, the kind lawyers use for contracts meant to bind. 6 pages, single-spaced, titled Prenuptial Agreement. The words blurred at first, but the intent was clear. All Langston assets, trusts, properties, shares were untouchable. In the event of divorce, I'd leave with nothing. No claim, no stake, no future. The room watched, some smirking, others sipping their wine as if this were routine entertainment. Margaret leaned in, her voice soft but venomous. "It's just a precaution, Sophia, to ensure you leave with nothing you didn't come with." The words landed like a slap, dressed in civility but meant to wound. I looked at Ethan, waiting for him to speak, to stand, to do something. He didn't. His jaw tightened, but his silence screamed louder than any protest could. And then I noticed the pen. Gold, engraved with Ethan and Sophia forever, a gift he'd given me earlier that evening. His voice warm as he'd said, "For our next chapter." I'd thought it was romantic, a token of love. Now it sat beside a document that stripped me of security, and he expected me to sign with it. The betrayal burned, not because of the prenup itself, but because he'd let it happen. He'd let his family reduce me to a transaction. I picked up the pen, felt its weight, and turned it in my hand. The room held its breath. Margaret's smile was triumphant, as if she'd already won. I set the pen down, closed the velvet box, and pushed it back toward Ethan. "I'm not sure what I walked into tonight," I said, my voice steady despite the fire in my chest. "But it doesn't feel like a family." I stood, my heels clicking against the marble as I walked out, leaving the envelope untouched. Margaret's expression flickered. Surprise, then something colder. I didn't slam the door. I didn't need to. My exit was enough. Outside, the Manhattan night was sharp, the autumn wind biting through my dress. I reached my car, a modest sedan parked among the Langston's fleet of black SUVs. The drizzle had started, streaking the windshield as I slid inside. I sat there, engine off, clutching the clutch with my father's initials etched into the leather. The weight of the evening settled, heavy as the rain. Margaret's words echoed. "Leave with nothing you didn't come with." But it wasn't her voice that cut deepest. It was Ethan's absence, the man who'd once held my hand through late-night case prep, now a stranger in his own home. I drove slowly, the city lights blurring through the rain. My phone buzzed, Ethan, probably with some rehearsed apology. I let it ring out, but as I turned onto the West Side Highway, headlights flared in my rearview mirror. Too close, too fast. A black SUV swerved, tailing me through the slick streets. My pulse spiked. I gripped the wheel, accelerating, but the SUV matched my speed, its tinted windows hiding whoever was inside. Was this a coincidence? Or had my refusal at the penthouse triggered something darker? I took a sharp turn onto a side street, my tires skidding on the wet pavement. The SUV followed, its engine roaring like a predator. My breath caught as I weaved through traffic, narrowly avoiding a delivery truck. The chase lasted 5 heart-pounding minutes until I pulled into a crowded gas station, the SUV peeling off into the night. My hands shook as I parked, my mind racing. Who were they? Langston Security? A hired thug? I didn't know, but I wasn't naive enough to think it was random. Back in my San Francisco apartment, the familiar scent of cedar and coffee grounded me. I kicked off my heels, poured a glass of water I didn't drink, and sank onto the couch. The city's hum filtered through the window, but it couldn't drown out the noise in my head. Ethan's silence, Margaret's smirk, the prenup's cold print. They swirled like a storm. My phone buzzed again. Ethan's name flashed, then faded. I ignored it. Then came a knock, sharp and insistent. I froze, my pulse still raw from the chase. Another knock, louder. I crossed the room, my hand hovering over the deadbolt, and opened the door. Ethan stood there, soaked from the rain, his hair plastered to his forehead. He looked smaller than the man who'd proposed to me under a San Francisco pier, his eyes bright with promise. Now, he looked like someone who'd gambled and lost. "Sophia, I didn't know she'd do it like that," he said, his voice low, almost pleading. "It was supposed to be a formality. I told her not to make it a spectacle." I leaned against the doorframe, my arms crossed. "But you did nothing, Ethan. You sat there while she humiliated me." His jaw worked, rain dripping from his lashes. I froze. "I didn't want to make a scene." I held his gaze, unyielding. "You didn't want to embarrass her." He flinched, but didn't deny it. "I'm not her," he said, stepping closer. "You know me so." "Do I?" My voice was calm, but it cut. Tonight made me wonder if I ever did. He opened his mouth, but no words came. I closed the door, the latch clicking with finality. My legs trembled as I walked back to the kitchen, the gold pen still in its box on the counter. Ethan and Sophia forever. The irony stung. I didn't sleep that night. I opened my laptop, scrolling through old emails, files, anything the Langstons had sent me. Every cordial invitation, every family dinner carried a hidden edge. At 3:11 a.m., I found it. A PDF titled Langston Trust Summary, sent by Margaret 6 months ago. I'd skimmed it then, distracted by a case. Now, I read every line. Page 7. In the event of an unsigned prenuptial agreement, the non-Langston party shall be excluded from all trust entitlements, including estate access, board positions, and shareholder rights. It wasn't about protecting Ethan. It was about fencing me out before I'd even arrived. My eyes burned as I opened another file, then another. Every email from Margaret was a masterclass in control. "We've selected the venue. No need to worry about vendors. The Langston Foundation handles it." My name was always copied, never centered. I was a guest in my own engagement. By 5:00 a.m., I was pacing, a mug of instant coffee gone cold in my hand. San Francisco stirred outside, delivery trucks rumbling, a dog barking in the distance. The truth hit like a brick. The Langstons never meant for me to be family. They meant for me to be a prop, polished, silent, grateful. Then my phone buzzed. Lena, my best friend, texted. "Check the date on that clause." I pulled up the metadata. April 17, 2 years ago. I met Ethan on November 3. 6 months before we'd even crossed paths, they drafted a clause to lock me out. My stomach twisted, not with sadness, but with clarity. This wasn't overprotective parenting, this was a strategy. I was a risk they'd planned for, a variable they'd accounted for before I'd even said I love you. I grabbed a legal pad and started writing. Every dinner I'd paid for, every late-night call I'd taken to help Ethan's foundation, every grant I'd rewritten because their consultant botched it. I had the receipts, the drafts, the proof. I wasn't just a lawyer, I was a fighter. And they'd underestimated me. At 6:14 a.m., another text from Lena. "You okay?" I typed back, "Getting there." Then my phone rang. Charles Langston. I stared at his name, my thumb hovering. I answered. "Sophia," he said, his voice smooth as a boardroom pitch. "Let's clear the air before this gets messy. The prenup isn't personal, it's protocol. We've been burned before. You're smart. You get it." I didn't flinch. "Is that what I am? Protocol?" A long pause. "It's not about you," he said, softer now. "It's about protecting what we've built." I set the phone down, my hands steady. This wasn't a family. It was a fortress. And I'd been invited into the lobby, never past the gate. As dawn broke, I drove to the San Francisco courthouse, my eyes gritty but my mind razor sharp. Lena was waiting, holding 2 coffees and a thick envelope. "I pulled the Langston trust filings," she said, her voice low. "You're not gonna like this." We found a quiet corner, the courthouse still waking up, and she opened her laptop. "This clause," she pointed, "was filed a year before you met Ethan, by Margaret's legal proxy. It wasn't for him, it was for you." The words sank in, cold and heavy. I wasn't an afterthought. I was a target, and Ethan had known. I pressed my hand to my chest, steadying the ache. "Did he ever love me?" I asked, not expecting an answer. Lena looked away, her silence louder than words. We left the courthouse, but as I crossed the parking lot, a man in a black hoodie stepped from the shadows, his hand reaching for my bag. Instinct kicked in. I twisted, slamming my elbow into his chest. He stumbled, cursing, and ran. My heart pounded, but I didn't scream. I clutched my bag tighter, the leather warm from my father's touch. This wasn't random. The Langstons were playing dirty. Back home, I found a package on my doorstep. No label, just a matte black box with my father's wax seal. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside, a note in his handwriting. "If this reaches you, it's time." Documents followed. His will, a trust certification, a private account in Seattle, coastal property, a tech patent. Total value $35 million, 0 cents. I sank to the floor, not for the money, but for what it meant. My father, distant and stern, had seen me when no one else did. He'd left me a weapon. I closed the box, my resolve hardening. The Langstons thought they could write my story, control me, silence me, erase me. But I wasn't their narrative. I was my own. Tomorrow, I'd walk back into their penthouse, not as a fiancé, but as a force. And this time, I'd bring my own pen. The San Francisco dawn was still gray when I woke, the taste of last night's revelations bitter on my tongue. The black box from my father sat on my kitchen counter, its wax seal broken, but its weight heavier than ever. My name is Sophia Voss, and in the span of 12 hours I'd gone from fiancé to fugitive in my own life. The Langstons had planned my erasure before I'd even met Ethan, and now, with a $35 million 0 cents inheritance in my hands, I was no longer just a target. I was a threat. But threats don't cower. They strike. I sipped black coffee, the steam curling like a warning. My apartment, a modest loft with exposed brick and a view of the bay, felt like the only safe harbor left. The memory of the chase on the West Side Highway lingered. The black SUV's headlights burned into my mind. Then there was the courthouse mugging attempt, the man in the hoodie lunging for my bag. The Langstons weren't just playing legal games, they were escalating. I opened my laptop, the screen glowing with Lena's email from last night. Attached was a leaked Langston PR deck, a 27-page manifesto titled Marital Merger Strategy, Q4 Positioning. My photo was on slide 4, captioned Sophia Voss, PhD candidate, underdog narrative, strong minority optics. I wasn't a fiancé, I was a marketing ploy. My phone buzzed. "Lena, you see it?" she asked, her voice tight. "They planned to use you to rebrand their foundation. Diversity asset, Sophia, that's what they called you." I closed my eyes, the words stinging like salt in a wound. "I'm going back to their penthouse today," I said. "With my own terms." Lena paused, then whispered, "Be careful. They don't lose gracefully." I dressed deliberately. Black blazer, white silk blouse, trousers that meant business. The leather clutch with my father's initials went into my bag, alongside a navy folder containing my counter prenup. It was simple but ironclad. Joint access to all future income, shared control of investments, and co-ownership of any brand or startup we built together. If signed, it would void the Langstons' restrictive clauses. I wasn't asking for their money, I was demanding equality. The drive to Manhattan was a blur, the Bay Bridge's steel arches fading into the rearview mirror. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from clarity. I wasn't walking into their world to beg. I was there to rewrite the rules. But as I merged onto the freeway, a low hum grew behind me. Another black SUV, identical to the one from last night, tailgated me, its grille gleaming like a predator's teeth. My knuckles whitened on the wheel. I floored the gas, weaving through morning traffic, horns blaring as I cut across lanes. The SUV stayed close, its driver hidden behind tinted glass. My pulse raced, but I remembered a trick from a self-defense class. Never let them corner you. I swerved into a crowded exit, pulling into a gas station packed with commuters. The SUV hesitated, then sped past. I exhaled, my hands trembling. This wasn't over. The Langston penthouse loomed on the Upper East Side, its glass facade reflecting the city like a mirror of power. The doorman, a stoic man in a crisp uniform, nodded as I entered, but his eyes lingered too long. Inside, the foyer was as cold as I remembered. Marble floors, a chandelier that screamed wealth, and a portrait of Ethan as a child, his golden curls and bow tie a reminder of his untouchable status. Margaret greeted me, her navy silk gown unchanged, her diamond earrings catching the light. "Sophia," she said, her smile practiced. "We're so glad you could join us again." Her tone was warm, but her eyes were knives. Ethan approached, his navy blazer crisp, but his shoulders tense. "You look nice," he said, his voice low, almost apologetic. I nodded, keeping my coat on. "Thanks for having me." Charles, Ethan's father, stood nearby, his gray suit as rigid as his posture. The rest of the family, cousins, advisors, a few unfamiliar faces, watched from the parlor, their whispers a low hum. I set my leather bag on the sideboard, the navy folder inside it like a loaded gun. Lunch was a performance of excess. Roasted duck, truffle risotto, sliced pears with artisanal cheese. The conversation drifted to safe harbors. Art auctions in London, a cousin's engagement in Sydney, a Langston-backed tech startup in Silicon Valley. No one mentioned the prenup or my dramatic exit. I played along, nodding when Charles praised my composure. Margaret's eyes held mine too long. "You're learning how our family works, Sophia," she said, her voice soft but poignant. "It suits you." I set down my fork, my pulse steady. "Thank you," I said, letting the words hang. The plates were cleared, champagne poured. Margaret watched Ethan, then me, her fingers tight around her flute. She was waiting for something. Compliance, maybe? She didn't know what was coming. I pushed back my chair just enough to draw their eyes. "Before we toast," I said, my voice calm but firm, "I'd like to say something." I reached into my bag and pulled out the navy folder, placing it in front of Ethan and Margaret. "This is my prenup, a little tradition from my side." The room froze. Margaret's fingers stilled. Ethan's brow furrowed. "What's this?" he asked, not touching the folder. "It's straightforward," I said, leaning in. "Joint access to all future income, shared investment control, co-ownership of any brand or startup we build. And," I tapped the folder, "if signed, it voids any prior clauses, including trust provisions from outside parties." Silence rang like a gunshot. Charles cleared his throat. "Is this a joke?" he asked, his voice low. I lifted my champagne glass, not drinking. No, but since we're all so fond of contracts, I thought we'd enjoy matching once." Ethan stared at the folder, his face pale. Margaret's mouth opened, then closed. "It's enforceable," I added, meeting Ethan's eyes. "Signed, dated, witnessed. All it needs is your signature." Charles muttered, You can't expect him to sign this. I set my glass down. I do, and it needs to be today or the engagement is off. Ethan pushed his chair back, nearly toppling it. You're bluffing. I reached into my bag, slow and deliberate, and placed my father's gold pen beside the folder. It gleamed under the chandelier, engraved with his initials, a relic of every deal he'd closed. I didn't speak. The pen said enough. Margaret's voice was tight. Why now? She asked. I tilted my head. Because I'd been told to know my place. I just thought you should know yours. The room erupted into murmurs. Charles signaled to an advisor, Franklin Mayer, a wiry man with too much cologne. He stepped into the parlor, his lips tight. What's going on? He asked. Charles gestured to the folder. She's demanding Ethan sign her prenup. I didn't flinch. It's been notarized, reviewed, and supersedes any unsigned drafts. Check it. Franklin skimmed the pages, his eyes narrowing. Margaret snapped, This is absurd. You can't waltz in and expect us to toss aside decades of planning because you had a good lawyer. I smiled, calm as stone. Actually, I can. I pulled out a second envelope, cream-colored, sealed with my father's crest. This is from my father's estate, dated 8 months before the engagement. I slid it to Franklin. It confirms me as sole heir to the Vost Trust, including royalties from a Seattle tech patent and coastal property. Total value, $35 million, 0 cents. If I marry into a legacy family, my assets stay protected unless you agree to full transparency. Otherwise, the merger is null. Margaret's face drained of color. Franklin unfolded a note inside, my father's handwriting sharp and clear. If they try to reduce you, remind them whose bloodline they're marrying. Ethan's mouth hung open, his voice cracking. This isn't fair. I turned to him, my gaze steady. Neither was handing me a document to strip me bare while you stayed silent. Charles sighed, loud and heavy. Ethan, sign the damn paper. Margaret jolted. Charles, you can't be serious. He snapped. I'm very serious. You wanted a Langston alliance. Here it is, on her terms. Ethan's hand shook as he picked up the pen, clicked it and signed. I nodded once, folded the folder, and tucked it into my bag. Thank you for your time, I said, standing. I pulled my coat over my shoulders and walked out, Franklin holding the door, his eyes oddly respectful. The wind outside was sharp, honest. My car waited at the base of the drive, past a fountain Ethan had once joked about naming after me. I didn't hurry. I wasn't running. Inside my car, the silence was a balm. I rested my hands on the wheel, letting the moment settle. Then my phone buzzed, 2 missed calls from Lena and a voicemail. I hit play. Sophia, it's Lena. Are you sitting down? Lucy, the PR assistant, just leaked something big. The Langston proposal deck, your photos on slide 3 labeled diversity asset. They plan to use you for a media redemption arc. My breath hitched, then steadied. I whispered to myself, of course they did. I opened Lena's email, scrolling through the deck. Charts, metrics, press release drafts, all framing my engagement as a strategic move to boost the Langston brand. Slide 3. My face, smiling at a charity event with bullet points about progressive optics and underdog narrative. I wasn't a partner, I was a tool. I laughed, sharp and short, the sound bouncing off the windshield. They thought I was a narrative, I said aloud. I'm a chapter they don't get to write. I drove to a small cafe in Soho, a tucked-away spot Lena said Lucy frequented. The air smelled of espresso and warm croissants, a stark contrast to the Langstons' sterile opulence. Lucy sat at a back table, her tablet clutched like a shield. She looked up, her eyes wide. Dr. Voss, she said, then corrected herself. Sophia, I sat across from her. You didn't have to risk your job for me, I said. She shook her head, pushing the tablet forward. They used your picture in 6 campaign drafts. One had a Vogue mock-up. Modern love meets legacy wealth. She swiped to a chain of emails from Margaret, Ethan's uncle, and PR heads. One line stood out. Her backstory will play beautifully in the Times piece. Ethan's hesitation is emotional, not strategic. I stared at that sentence, the word hesitation cutting deeper than I expected. Lucy's voice broke the silence. He cried when he heard about your inheritance. Said now we can finally be equals. It's the only time I heard him sound real. I nodded, my throat tight. Thank you, Lucy. This is more than a leak, it's clarity. She looked down. They'll blame you. I smiled softly. Let them. I stepped outside and called Lena. Set up the foundation account today, I said, my voice steady. Remove the Langston name from all partnerships. I want them gone. Lena didn't hesitate. Already done, and Sophia, proud of you. That evening, I sat by my apartment window, a cup of chamomile tea cooling in my hands. The city lights blinked, indifferent to the storm inside me. I logged into our wedding portal, the banner still bright with our engagement photo. I typed a new message. Event canceled due to privacy breaches and third-party interference. The Langston family regrets to announce the indefinite postponement of the Voss-Langston wedding. Below, Margaret had posted a sanitized note implying I'd violated confidentiality. I didn't flinch. I uploaded a zip file, 27 pages of emails, drafts, and the PR deck with my face stamped under Asset Repositioning Strategy. No caption, no explanation, just truth. I leaned back, watching the upload icon spin, then vanish. The file went to 3 journalists I trusted, one at The Atlantic, one at the Wall Street Journal, and an old professor-turned-columnist who'd warned me about families like the Langstons. Then I drafted a public statement. I have nothing to gain, but others deserve to know when families play God with reputations and love. I hit publish, my hands steady. 23 minutes later, the first alert pinged, then 6 more, then hundreds. The emails had gone viral. X was ablaze, with influencers dissecting the marital merger scandal. A TikTok vlogger stood before a whiteboard, circling diversity asset and my photo, her voice sharp. Would you marry someone who called you a PR move? The outrage wasn't just about me. It was about every woman reduced to a pawn in someone else's game. The Langstons didn't stay quiet long. Ethan released a video statement from their Hamptons estate, his navy blazer crisp, his tone rehearsed. I never meant to hurt anyone, he said, standing by the fireplace. I believed in love, and I still do. This is complicated. I ask for privacy. He didn't say my name. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. By midnight, the fallout began. A tech startup pulled funding from the Langston Foundation. A children's literacy program issued a press release distancing itself. A major fashion brand canceled a collaboration with Margaret, citing ethical concerns. By morning, she'd stepped down from her board roles, blaming health issues. A New York senator named in the PR deck opened an investigation into undisclosed lobbying through personal relationships. The Langstons hadn't just played with my life. They'd gambled with their empire. I stayed in my office that afternoon, the San Francisco fog pressing against the windows. Lena brought a sandwich and lit 2 votive candles, their flicker soft against the marble sill. She didn't speak, just squeezed my hand. I looked at her, my voice low. It's not revenge. It's exposure. Truth isn't cruel. It's overdue. She nodded, her eyes bright. You're rewriting the games. That night, I sat at my desk, the wedding folder open on my laptop, guest lists, mood boards, vows I'd drafted in a haze of hope. I right-clicked, selected, delete, and confirmed. The screen went blank, then a new email arrived, subject line blank, from Ethan. Did you ever love me? I stared at the words, not because I doubted my answer, but because he still thought this was about him. I clicked block. The connection severed like a cut wire. Another ping followed. A message from a London-based NGO. We'd like to fund your foundation fully. When can we talk? I leaned back, the tea cold in my hands. This wasn't just an escape. It was a beginning. 3 weeks later, I stood outside a brick building in Washington, D.C., its frosted windows and polished railings a quiet promise of power. The elevator smelled of leather and purpose. The NGO offered full backing for my foundation, office space, staff, press support, but only if I led it. I gave them one condition: no branding women as broken or brave. We fund their voices, not their pain. They agreed, and the Marin Fund was born, named for my grandmother, who'd taught me to bloom where no one expected me to. The fund's first campaign, Signatures of Silence, launched with my story, a digital series exposing how family contracts shackle women into compliance. The first billboard went up across from a Langston event hall in Chicago, my face beside the words, "She refused to sign, so can you." The New York Times ran a feature, "The Woman Who Rewrote the Rules." I didn't flinch, not when Margaret's radio apology dripped with false remorse, not when Ethan vanished into silence, not when Charles's empire crumbled under scrutiny. One evening, alone in my new Seattle loft, I poured a glass of red wine and opened a drawer. Inside was the Langston Prenup, its pages heavy with clauses that tried to erase me. I slipped it into a metal tag labeled "Closed Lessons" and locked it away. My laptop chimed, another message from Ethan, slipped through a new account. "Did you ever love me?" I felt nothing, no anger, no ache, just clarity. I hit block and opened my journal, writing to the girl I'd been. "You weren't too much, you were ahead. They feared your power before you knew it, but you found it." I curled onto my sofa, the city lights distant and calm. No contracts, no conditions, just peace. The Langstons thought they could write my ending, but real value doesn't come from signatures. It comes when you stop asking for permission and start writing your own terms.